James Tiberius Kirk was born on the 22nd of March 2233 in Riverside, Iowa, a small town on Earth. Raised by his mother Winona Kirk, James grew up with a rebellious streak, often pushing the boundaries of authority. His childhood was not without hardship, especially following the loss of his father, which had a profound impact on his personality. The absence of a strong paternal figure, coupled with his desire to live up to his father's legacy, set the stage for Kirk's ambitions and sometimes reckless nature. Kirk was intelligent, driven, and prone to getting into trouble. His natural leadership abilities were evident early on, although his rebellious nature often clashed with expectations. In some versions of his backstory, he's portrayed as a farm boy who grew up on a quiet countryside, a stark contrast to the daring starship captain he would eventually become. In other iterations, like the Kelvin timeline, he's depicted as a thrill-seeker, speeding through life and getting into fights until fate brings him to Starfleet. But no matter the differences in these versions of Captain Kirk, one thing remains the same. He is one of the most legendary captains ever to serve in Starfleet. So in today's video, we will delve deeply into his life, his career, his time at Starfleet Academy and his training, and everything else. This is the longest video I have ever written, so I really hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. Kirk's path to Starfleet Academy was unconventional. Unlike many of his peers who joined Starfleet out of a desire for order or exploration, Kirk's journey was fueled by a desire to prove himself. In both the Prime and Kelvin timelines, Kirk was convinced to join Starfleet by Captain Christopher Pike, who saw the potential for greatness within him, despite his rough edges. Pike, who was a mentor figure, famously challenged Kirk in the Kelvin timeline, saying, "Your father was captain of a starship for 12 minutes, and he saved 800 lives, including your mother's and your own. I dare you to do better." Now, while I know many of you are not fans of the Kelvin timeline, and some of this isn't necessarily considered canon as Kirk's backstory, it's worth noting that in Strange New Worlds, Pike talks to that version of Captain Kirk, and he notes that his father, George Kirk, did serve on the USS Kelvin, kind of making this canon. So there is an argument to be made that the events, at least leading up to the birth of Captain Kirk on the USS Kelvin where the timeline splits, is canon. Anyway, at Starfleet Academy, Kirk excelled academically, but he also became known for his unorthodox methods. He was brilliant and quick-witted, yet his arrogance sometimes caused friction with his instructors and fellow cadets. A key moment that solidified Kirk's legend at the Academy was his handling of the legendary Kobayashi Maru test. The Kobayashi Maru is a no-win scenario designed to test a cadet's ability to face certain defeat. Most candidates approach the test with caution, accepting the impossibility of victory. Kirk, however, refused to accept the idea of a no-win scenario, and in a controversial move, he reprogrammed the test to allow himself to win, much to the astonishment and displeasure of his superiors. When questioned about his actions, Kirk famously defended his decision, stating that he didn't believe in losing. This act of defiance was the epitome of Kirk's philosophy throughout his career. He never accepted defeat and always found a way to turn the odds in his favour. After graduation from the Academy, Kirk's rapid ascent through the ranks of Starfleet was nothing short of extraordinary. By the time he completed his training, Kirk was poised for command, and in 2264, at the age of just 32, he became the youngest captain in Starfleet history when he was given command of the USS Enterprise, NCC 1701. Kirk's early leadership style was characterized by a mixture of boldness and ingenuity. He was known for taking risks, but his keen sense of strategy often allowed him to outmaneuver enemies and turn perilous situations to his advantage. His command decisions were guided by a strong sense of responsibility for his crew, and while he could be impulsive, Kirk's moral compass always pointed towards the greater good. In command of the Enterprise, Kirk embarked on a 5-year mission of deep space exploration that cemented his reputation as one of Starfleet's most legendary figures. His early missions were full of first contacts with alien species, confrontations with powerful adversaries like the Klingons and the Romulans, and ethical dilemmas that tested the core values of the Federation as a whole. Kirk's career at this point was defined not only by his tactical brilliance, but also by his deep commitment to Starfleet's mission of peaceful exploration. Despite the dangers that he faced, he maintained an unshakable belief in the ideals of the Federation, often going to great lengths to preserve peace, even when violence seemed like the easier option. His early years in command were a reflection of his evolving maturity, moving from the brash, rebellious cadet at the Academy to a leader who carried the weight of his crew's lives on his shoulders. Let's talk a little more about this 5-year mission. Now, like I stated, this was a journey filled with first contacts, political intrigue, and dangerous encounters with powerful alien species. This mission focused on the exploration of uncharted space, and it was defined by the Federation's goal to seek out new life and new civilizations, and of course to boldly go where no one had gone before. Kirk's leadership of the Enterprise had made him a celebrated figure known throughout the galaxy. During his tenure, Kirk led the Enterprise into a multitude of challenging situations. One of his defining traits was his unwavering ability to adapt and innovate in the face of danger, whether it be an encounter with Klingons or a showdown with the genetically engineered superhuman Khan Noonien Singh in the episode Space Seed. Kirk consistently demonstrated his resourcefulness and courage. His decisions were often unconventional, but they reflected his deep understanding of both Starfleet protocols and the complexities of interstellar diplomacy. Kirk's handling of these situations solidified his reputation as a leader who didn't believe in no-win scenarios. And this philosophy, which he first demonstrated at the Academy with the Kobayashi Maru test, became a guiding principle throughout his career, and he would often find ways to bend or reinterpret the rules to achieve the best possible outcome, even when the odds were stacked against him. Now, his success as a captain was closely tied to the strength of his relationships with his crew, particularly his first officer, Mr. Spock, and the ship's chief medical officer, Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy. These two relationships formed the heart of his command style and provided a balance of perspectives that shaped many of his decisions. Spock, the half-Vulcan, half-human science officer, was Kirk's most trusted confidant and embodiment of logic and reason. While Kirk was driven by instinct and emotion, Spock's logical approach often provided a stabilizing counterpoint. Their friendship was based on a mutual respect, and though they frequently disagreed, they understood each other in a way that allowed them to function seamlessly as a command team. Spock's ability to remain calm under pressure and his Vulcan stoicism complemented Kirk's more impulsive nature, making their partnership one of the most iconic in television history. Now, a defining episode in their relationship is the Galileo 7, where Kirk and Spock clash over how to prioritize the rescue of a shuttlecraft crew that had been stranded on a hostile planet. Spock's purely logical approach to leadership is questioned by the crew, but Kirk's trust in Spock's abilities helps navigate the mission to a successful conclusion. This dynamic of mutual reliance is repeated throughout their 5-year mission, particularly in moments where logic and emotion intersect. In contrast to all this, Dr. McCoy represented the emotional, human side of command. Where Spock was all logic, McCoy was the voice of conscience, often reminding Kirk of the moral implications of his decisions. McCoy's loyalty to Kirk was unwavering, and their friendship was marked by candid and often humorous banter. Despite McCoy's tendency to criticize Kirk's impulsiveness, he deeply respected Kirk's ability to lead. Their exchanges were a critical element of the show, offering both levity and deeper philosophical reflections on the nature of humanity and leadership. Episodes like Balance of Terror exemplify Kirk's reliance on the counsel of both Spock and McCoy. In this episode, Kirk faces off against a Romulan ship across the neutral zone, and his decisions are shaped by a delicate balance of military strategy influenced by Spock's logic and compassion influenced by McCoy's emotional insight. This interplay between his two closest advisors demonstrates the depths of Kirk's leadership, as he was able to draw from the strengths of both individuals to guide the Enterprise through its most perilous encounters. Now let's look a little bit at Kirk's leadership style. His command style was a study in contrasts. He was both a calculated tactician and an instinct-driven risk-taker. While other Starfleet captains, such as Jean-Luc Picard, were known for their diplomacy and patience, Kirk's leadership was defined by his ability to make split-second decisions in life-or-death situations. He trusted his gut and often took unorthodox actions, but these gambles usually paid off, earning him a reputation for getting results. A great example of this is in the episode The Corbomite Maneuver, where Kirk bluffs his way out of what seems like certain destruction by convincing a powerful alien adversary that the Enterprise has a deadly self-destruct mechanism. The Corbomite, which he refers to, doesn't actually exist. And this audacious move illustrates Kirk's belief in the value of ingenuity and bravado as critical tools in command. This is definitely something that Jean-Luc Picard is likely never to do, or at least not as often as Kirk. At the same time, he was deeply aware of the weight of his command. He understood that the lives of his crew were in his hands, and the responsibility drove him to make the best decisions possible, even in impossible scenarios. The episode The City on the Edge of Forever really exemplifies this struggle. In this episode, Kirk is forced to choose between saving the life of Edith Keeler, a woman that he loves, and allowing history to proceed as it should, thus preventing the rise of Nazi Germany. His decision to let her die despite his personal feelings highlights the burden that comes with leadership. His ability to inspire loyalty in his crew was one of his greatest strengths. He was not just a commander but a leader who cared deeply for those under his charge. His crew followed him not out of obligation, but because they trusted him implicitly. Episodes like The Devil in the Dark, where Kirk shows a compassion for a misunderstood alien species, underscore his belief in the value of life, even when facing seemingly hostile beings. So let's look a little bit about some of the key adventures and challenges that Kirk faced in his career. One of the most significant ongoing challenges was his encounters with the Klingon Empire and the Romulan Star Empire. These two factions were major adversaries of the Federation during the 23rd century, and Kirk often found himself on the front lines of these confrontations. His first notable encounter with the Romulans came in the episode Balance of Terror. In this episode, the Enterprise is called to respond to an attack on Federation outposts along the Romulan neutral zone. This marks the first time a Federation crew sees the Romulans, who kind of resemble Vulcans, a fact that causes tension between Spock and the rest of the crew. Kirk's tactical brilliance is on full display here as he engages a tense cat-and-mouse battle with the Romulan ship. Kirk's ability to anticipate his enemy's moves and his willingness to take calculated risks ultimately leads to the Romulans' defeat, but not without the heavy emotional toll of warfare. This episode solidified the Romulans as a dangerous threat throughout the rest of the Star Trek series. The Klingons, on the other hand, were a more direct and aggressive foe. One of Kirk's most important encounters with them occurred in the episode Errand of Mercy. Here the Federation is on the brink of war with the Klingon Empire, and Kirk is sent to the planet Organia to prevent the Klingons from gaining a strategic foothold. What Kirk doesn't expect is that the seemingly primitive locals are in fact incredibly advanced, non-corporeal beings who intervene to prevent the conflict. This episode ends with the Organians forcing a peace between the Federation and the Klingons, much to the surprise of both Kirk and the Klingon Commander Kor. This episode is pivotal in the Star Trek canon, as it hints at the eventual peace between the two powers, which is seen in later Star Trek seasons like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. In his dealings with both the Klingons and the Romulans, Kirk demonstrated a combination of military prowess and diplomatic skill. He understood that while combat was sometimes necessary, peace and diplomacy were always the preferable outcome. His ability to navigate these tense situations without always resorting to violence made him an exemplary Starfleet officer. Now, perhaps the most iconic of Kirk's enemies was Khan Noonien Singh, a genetically engineered superhuman from Earth's 20th century. Khan first appears in the original series episode Space Seed, where the Enterprise discovers the SS Botany Bay, a sleeper ship containing Khan and his fellow superhumans, who had been in suspended animation for centuries. Upon being revived, Khan attempts to seize control of the Enterprise, believing his genetically engineered superiority entitles him to rule. Kirk, of course, ultimately defeats Khan and maroons him and his followers on the planet Ceti Alpha 5, where they are left to build a new life. This is a story that, of course, continues later on, but we'll get there. Another example of an ethical challenge that Kirk faced is in the episode A Taste of Armageddon, where he encounters two planets locked in a centuries-long war fought through computer simulations. Instead of engaging in physical combat, each side targets the other citizens for destruction based on the outcomes of simulated attacks. Kirk ultimately disrupts the system, forcing the two planets to face the reality of their war. This episode highlights Kirk's belief in the sanctity of life and refusal to accept violence as a detached or abstract concept. In The Devil in the Dark, Kirk demonstrates his willingness to look beyond initial assumptions when he encounters the Horta, a silicon-based life form that initially appears to be a threat. However, Kirk and Spock soon discover that the Horta is merely trying to protect its eggs, and the real threat comes from the miners who have unwittingly disturbed its home. Kirk's ability to emphasize an alien life form so different from anything the crew has encountered before speaks volumes to his openness about the ideals of exploration that Starfleet embodies. One of the interesting recurring themes in Kirk's career is actually the burden of command. While Kirk often appeared confident and assured, he carried the weight of his decisions with him, especially when they involved the lives of his crew. Episodes like Obsession explore the aspect of his character, as Kirk becomes fixated on a creature that he had encountered years earlier as a lieutenant. The creature had killed many members of his crew during the previous encounter, and Kirk is haunted by the guilt of having survived while others perished. His pursuit of this creature in the present-day narrative becomes a way for him to confront his past mistakes and atone for what he sees as personal failure. With all of this being said, Captain James T. Kirk's legendary career is not just confined to his 5-year mission aboard the USS Enterprise. After his 5-year mission, Kirk reluctantly accepted a promotion to Admiral in Starfleet Command. While this promotion represented recognition of his exceptional career and leadership, it also came with a personal cost. Kirk's true passion had always been space exploration, and the bureaucratic life of an admiral in Starfleet was something he never fully embraced. This reluctance to settle into a desk job is explored in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the first feature-length Star Trek film. In this film, Kirk is initially serving as an admiral, but when an alien entity threatens Earth, Kirk seizes the opportunity to return to the captain's chair. His return is not without controversy, however, as he takes command from Captain Will Decker, who was assigned to the newly refitted Enterprise. This decision highlights a key aspect of Kirk's character, his inability to let go of his role as a starship captain. He belongs in space. He belongs commanding the Enterprise, and this yearning to return to active duty drives many of his decisions throughout his career. As an admiral, Kirk's leadership was more strategic and less hands-on, but the call of adventure and the need for his experience continually draw him back into the field. His promotion and subsequent assignments are a double-edged sword, offering him recognition but taking him away from the exploration and action that he craves. Kirk's dissatisfaction with retirement actually becomes far more apparent in the second Star Trek movie, The Wrath of Khan. At this point, Kirk is feeling the weight of his years and grappling with his legacy. He refers to himself as feeling old, and his sense of stagnation is only heightened by his desk job in Starfleet. The surprise return of Khan Noonien Singh and the intense personal stakes of the conflict in this film reawaken Kirk's desire for adventure and action. His return to active duty becomes a central theme in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, and Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, where he leads his loyal crew in defiance of Starfleet's orders. Kirk's willingness to break Starfleet regulations to achieve what he believes is right demonstrates his unshakable commitment to his friends and to the Federation, even if it means going against Starfleet itself. The consequences of these actions culminate in Kirk's demotion from Admiral to Captain at the end of Star Trek IV. Now, while his demotion is technically a punishment for his actions, it's also somewhat of a relief to Kirk, who had always thrived in the role of captain, and his return to the captain's chair aboard the newly christened USS Enterprise A is symbolic of his true calling, leading a starship and embarking on bold missions of exploration. This demotion is, in essence, a return to where Kirk always belonged. It's actually during this whole saga that Kirk experiences one of the biggest challenges of his career, and we can't cover his story in a video like this without going into more details about it. The Genesis saga is a pivotal series of events in James T. Kirk's life, playing out across 3 films: Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock, and The Voyage Home. These films not only depict some of Kirk's most personal and emotional challenges, but also demonstrate his growth as a leader, friend, and even person, showcasing his deep sense of loyalty and sacrifice. Now, we touched upon Khan in the description of the episode Space Seed earlier on, but as you know, he was a genetically enhanced superhuman that was left on Ceti Alpha 5. Now, Kirk assumes that Khan's threat is neutralized here. However, when Chekhov and the crew of the Starship Reliance stumble across the barren wasteland of Ceti Alpha 5, Khan re-emerges, burning with a desire for revenge against Kirk for what he sees as abandonment on a dying planet. In The Wrath of Khan, Khan's revenge is not merely physical, but deeply psychological. He attacks Kirk's vulnerabilities, his age, his sense of duty, his ability to face loss. One of the key themes in this film is Kirk's grappling with the passage of time. Now older and no longer in command of the Enterprise, Kirk feels disconnected from the adventurous life he once had, and Khan's reappearance forces him to confront his past decisions. The most emotional moment in this film comes in the form of Spock's death. During the climactic battle of the movie, Khan detonates a powerful Genesis device in the final bid to destroy the Enterprise. With no other options, Spock sacrifices himself by entering the ship's radiation-filled warp core to repair the damage and enable the ship's escape. His final words to Kirk, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one," reflect the deep philosophical and emotional bond between the two. Spock's death is a devastating blow to Kirk, marking the first time he is truly faced with the irreversible loss of a close friend. Kirk's reaction, his quiet disbelief, and the utterance of "Spock" in a soft voice shows the depth of his grief. This film not only focuses on action, but also introspection. The Wrath of Khan explores Kirk's fear of aging and the consequences of his decisions. Kirk's journey in this film is as much about confronting his past as it is about defeating Khan. The film's final lines, where Kirk states, "I feel young," after witnessing the Genesis planet's birth, are reflective of his renewed sense of hope and the possibilities that still lie ahead, despite the deep personal cost. Now, the death of Spock was not the end of the saga. In Star Trek III, The Search for Spock picks up where The Wrath of Khan leaves off, with Kirk mourning his fallen friend. The film's central plot revolves around Kirk's quest to restore Spock's life. His determination to save him is fueled by his deep sense of responsibility and the guilt that he feels over his friend's death. He is willing to sacrifice everything: his career, the Enterprise, and even his relationship with his estranged son, David Marcus, to bring Spock back. In a dramatic sequence, Kirk and his crew steal the Enterprise and embark on a dangerous mission to Genesis, defying Starfleet orders in the process. The emotional climax of the film comes when Kirk confronts the Klingon commander, who kills David in cold blood, shattering Kirk's emotional state. Kirk's reaction, falling to his knees and crying out, "You Klingon bastard, you killed my son," is one of the most powerful moments in the film. It shows a side of Kirk rarely seen: vulnerability and deep personal loss. Up until this point, Kirk had always been able to outmaneuver and outthink his enemies, but here he is faced with a tragedy that he cannot reverse. In the final moments of the film, after defeating his enemy and escaping from the destroyed Enterprise, Kirk is reunited with a newly resurrected Spock on Vulcan. Though Spock's memory is not fully restored, the glimmer of recognition between the two friends offers hope for the future. This reunion is both triumphant and bittersweet, as Kirk has won back his friend, but lost his son and his beloved ship in the process. The Search for Spock explores the depths of Kirk's loyalty and his sacrifices he is willing to make for those that he loves. The emotional weight of the previous two films is balanced by the more light-hearted tone of The Voyage Home. In this film, Kirk and his crew must travel back in time to 1986 to retrieve a pair of humpback whales, whose unique song is the only way to communicate with a mysterious alien probe threatening Earth in the 23rd century. Despite the lighter tone, The Voyage Home continues to explore Kirk's character development, particularly his role as a leader who takes full responsibility for his actions. At the end of the film, after successfully saving Earth by bringing the whales back to the future, Kirk faces a court-martial for his previous actions, including stealing the Enterprise and disobeying orders in the search for Spock. In a show of appreciation for his many years of service and his role in saving the planet, Kirk's punishment is reduced to a demotion, from Admiral back to Captain. Just like I said earlier, this demotion wasn't really a punishment for Kirk, but a return to his true calling. The Voyage Home brings closure to the Genesis saga by restoring Kirk to his role as captain, reaffirming his place in Starfleet and reuniting him with his crew. The saga as a whole illustrates Kirk's unbreakable loyalty to his friends, as well as his ability to adapt in changing circumstances and his willingness to face loss in order to uphold his values and responsibilities. Now let's look at the events of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Kirk faces one of his greatest challenges. Yeah, another one. Helping to broker the peace with the Klingon Empire. This film is significant because it brings Kirk's long-standing rivalry with the Klingons to a head. In earlier films, particularly Star Trek III, Kirk harbored a deep personal hatred for the Klingons after they killed his son. This hatred makes his role in the peace negotiations especially complex and personal. In Undiscovered Country, the Klingon Empire is on the verge of collapse following the destruction of one of their moons. As the Federation moves towards peace talks, Kirk is called upon to escort the Klingon Chancellor Gorkon to Earth. However, when Gorkon is assassinated, Kirk and Dr. McCoy are framed for the crime and imprisoned. This incident leads to a larger conspiracy designed to prevent peace between the Klingons and the Federation. Kirk's personal growth here is evident in this film. While he initially resists the idea of peace with the Klingons, his experiences throughout the film force him to confront his own prejudices. He ultimately plays a crucial role in exposing the conspiracy and helping to bring about a peace accord. This development is significant because it shows that even in his later years, Kirk is capable of growth and change. He can put aside his personal feelings for the greater good, demonstrating once again his continued commitment to Starfleet's ideals. This story ends with Kirk and his crew preparing to return to Earth for their official decommissioning, symbolizing the passing of the torch to a new generation of Starfleet officers. Kirk's final log entry, where he says, "Second star to the right and straight on till morning," encapsulates his undying love for exploration and the adventure that awaits, even as his formal career in Starfleet draws to a close. Now, Kirk's story officially comes to a dramatic and emotional conclusion in Star Trek Generations, where he meets Captain Jean-Luc Picard, the commanding officer of the USS Enterprise D in the 24th century. The film begins with Kirk attending the christening of USS Enterprise B. However, during its maiden voyage, the Enterprise B encounters a strange energy ribbon known as the Nexus. When the ship becomes trapped, Kirk sacrifices himself to save the crew and is presumed dead. However, he is not truly dead. He is transported into the Nexus, a timeless utopian dimension where he can live out his greatest desires. And when Captain Picard enters the Nexus years later, seeking a way to stop the mad scientist Dr. Tolian Soran from destroying a star to re-enter the Nexus, he finds Kirk living a peaceful, idyllic version of the past. Picard convinces Kirk to leave the Nexus and to help him stop Soran. Although Kirk has found contentment in the Nexus, he cannot resist the call to action and the opportunity to make a difference one more time. In the final act of the film, Kirk and Picard work together to stop Soran from destroying a star, but Kirk is fatally injured in the process. His final words are, "It was fun," which I feel really capture the essence of his adventurous spirit and his love for life. Kirk's death in Generations marks the end of an era for Starfleet, but his legacy lives on throughout the officers he inspired, particularly Captain Picard. His death is both heroic and poignant as he dies doing what he loves, saving lives and making a difference. His final sacrifice is a fitting end for a character who spent his entire career putting the needs of others above his own. Now, technically, Kirk's story does continue in the books, but we're not going to cover those here today. If you want a video on his story throughout the novels, please let me know in the comments down below. So, James T. Kirk's legacy extended far beyond his own lifetime. In the Prime timeline, he became a symbol of Starfleet's ideals: courage, exploration, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. His leadership style, which combined boldness with compassion, influenced generations of Starfleet officers, including Picard. The many ships that bore the name USS Enterprise carried forward the spirit of exploration and diplomacy that Kirk embodied. In the Kelvin timeline, introduced in the 2009 Star Trek reboot, Kirk's legacy is explored in an alternate reality, where his life follows a slightly different path due to the intervention of the Romulan Nero. However, the essence of Kirk's character, his daring, leadership, and charisma remains intact in this timeline as well, proving that his influence transcends timelines and alternate realities. Kirk's legacy is further cemented in Starfleet history by his numerous commendations, awards, and his significant role in shaping the Federation's policies on exploration, diplomacy, and even interspecies relations. His actions during the Klingon peace process, his role in numerous first contacts, and his famous stand against no-win scenarios made him a legend within the Federation. Kirk's legacy endures not only in the Star Trek universe, but also in the hearts of fans worldwide. He remains a symbol of exploration and adventure, and the boundless possibilities that await those who dare to venture into the unknown. He is not only my favourite Star Trek character, but my favourite TV character ever. This video was an absolute pleasure to work on, and also the longest video I have ever made, so I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if there's anything else you want to see in this style, a more deeper dive, then again, leave your suggestions in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, live long and prosper, and I'll see you next time on Federation Outpost 111.